Welcome back, everyone. The response to my Pool Noodle Tentacle video was so positive, I thought I would go ahead and keep the momentum going with another Halloween DIY tutorial. This is one that I really enjoy. It's effective, it's cheap, it's easy, it's super fun to do, plus the end result is really gross, which is always a huge plus. Wanna see? Well, was I lying? If you're having a competition with your neighbors to see who has the scariest decorations on the block, I think these will really help you come out ahead. No? Well, maybe they'll help give you a leg up on the competition. Oof, tough crowd. Well, hey, it's no skin off my nose. If you've got a bone to pick about any of my jokes, maybe you just have a rotten sense of humor.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it!
Ugh, fine. Let's just roll the intro and let's get started on making some dismembered body part props. So this is a bag of bones. There's usually about 12 or 13 pieces in these. Cost about $10, and they sell them anywhere that they sell Halloween supplies. The contents are usually pretty consistent, although they do vary from store to store, and sometimes from bag to bag, but there's usually a good assortment of bones. For this video, we're primarily interested in a femur, a foot, and 2 smaller bones for the lower leg. In this case, it's going to have to be 2 tibias, since they didn't include a fibula. Now this will give us one really good leg. We're also going to hang on to this skull and this section of vertebrae. Next, we'll need a can of spray foam gap filler, and this is available at hardware stores for about $3 a can, and 1 can should last you quite a while. We'll need plastic wrap, which is fortunately pretty cheap because we'll be using a fair amount of it. We'll also need various colors of spray paint. Now you'll definitely want a glossy red for the underlying tissues, but the other colors you use are pretty much up to you. I find that various shades of earth tones tend to look really good, as they look like human flesh in various stages of decomposition. Now if you want to get all fancy-like, you could even throw in some green or gray to make it look more rotten and zombie-ish, or straight black to make it look burned and charred. The only specialized tool you're going to need is a heat gun, although in a pinch, you can also use a blow dryer on a high heat setting. So far so good? Let's get into it. So let's start with the leg. What you want to do first is kind of generally line up the bones so that they look like a leg. A lot of this is going to be covered by foam and plastic, so you don't have to be super anatomically precise. In fact, a lot of you may be asking, why bother using the 2 small leg bones when you could just use 1 if it's all going to be covered anyway?
Well, duh.
Because if you're going to do something, do it right. I actually think it's more fun to do it this way anyway. Plus, if you do it in such a way that any of the bones are showing through the foam, this will make it look more or less anatomically correct. Now that they're more or less aligned, we're going to attach them. I used to try to glue these together, or screw them together, or all manner of other methods, until I realized it was unnecessary and pointless, since later stages of the project will hold them together anyway. So now I just use tape. It's way faster, way easier, and also way cheaper. Now we move on to the foam. This stuff is extremely sticky, so you'll want to use gloves. Basically, we'll just slowly spray a thick layer of this stuff all over the bones. It expands as it dries and leaves a lumpy texture, which is excellent for creating that decomposing muscle look. Also, make sure you leave some patches of exposed bone, especially the knob of the femur and the toes, and a few bits in between. Then we hang it and leave it to dry for a few hours. And if you're clumsy like me and something like this should happen, you don't need to worry about it too much. You can always just add more foam on top of the damaged areas. But I think you're beginning to see why we're doing this in the garage. Now that the foam is dry, it's time for the first layer of paint. Cover up any exposed bone with painter's tape, and then hit the foam with a coat of gloss red paint.
Say what?
I know, I've said it before. Foam and spray paint do not mix. Because spray paint and foam do not mix. But this stuff is a little different. It's not like regular styrofoam or polystyrene, and it doesn't melt when exposed to spray paint. Or at least not nearly as much. It may shrink down a tiny amount, but it's pretty negligible, and frankly, even if it does, it'll just add to the rotting effect we're going for. The spray paint should be dried to the touch in about 20 to 30 minutes. Waiting for paint and foam to dry is by far the most time-consuming part of this project, which sucks because the name of the game here is layers. After this point, we're going to be adding layer after layer after layer of plastic wrap and different colors of spray paint. Wrap the whole leg in plastic once or twice, then choose a color and paint. It doesn't matter too much which color you choose until you get to the final 1 or 2 layers. Wait for the paint to dry, then repeat with more plastic and more spray paint, mixing up the colors from layer to layer. You'll want to do at least 4 or 5 total layers. The last 1 or 2 layers is where you're going to want to think about the color. Now I like to put a very dark paint on the second to last layer, and then more of a pale pink and beige layer on the outside for contrast. You'll see what I mean in the final product. Once all the layers are on and the paint is dry, it's time for the heat gun. This is where the magic really happens. Now anyone who's seen the ending of Raiders of the Lost Ark probably knows where we're going with this. Yep, that's the idea, although not quite as dramatic. Put the heat gun on high heat and go over the legs slowly and carefully. There's no rush at this point. You can see that as the outer layers of plastic shrink, melt, and pull apart, the inner layers are exposed. Now try to mix it up a little, have some of each layer visible, including the red foam and the bone. That's it, we're done. The skull is really going to be the same thing, although it's actually simpler because we're not going to be using the foam. I mean, I guess you could, but it's really just not necessary. We're going to be adding 4 or 5 layers of plastic wrap to this, just like we did with the leg, and that by itself should add enough tissue to make a decent sized head. Now this little vertebrae piece is optional. I think it looks pretty good, but it does have the effect of making the neck look really unnaturally skinny if you wrap it up with the plastic wrap the same way you do with the head. I think it actually looks pretty good if you just leave it exposed, or if you just add some kind of raggedy bits of flesh hanging off of it. But for this one, I think we'll just do without, but just know that that is something that is often included in the kit. So once again, we play the layering game. Plastic wrap, paint, repeat. And repeat. And repeat. Then finish it off with the heat gun. I like to pay special attention to the eye sockets and the mouth. Really get those teeth and empty sockets exposed. Et voila! That's really all there is to it. This is a really fun project to do. Okay, actually most of it is about as much fun as watching paint dry. That is, if you just sit there and stare at them as they dry. But don't do that. Find something better to do. I like making these myself. I think the ones that you find in the Halloween stores cost a lot more and frankly look a lot cheaper. Plus there's a certain satisfaction in just doing things yourself. And after all of this, there are still some random bones left in the bag, so go nuts. See what you can make with them. Let me know what you come up with by leaving me a comment. And if you like this project, then like this video, share it with your friends, or subscribe to see more. Thanks again, and enjoy the countdown to Halloween.